Good morning, everybody. Ernie C. DeBaca here at the Hispano Chamber. We're the morning of Gala, La Noche Encantada, February 18th. We're really excited about the evening, and we're really excited and honored to be here with my good friend Saul Trujillo. Saul Trujillo is currently the co-founder of the Latino Donor Collaborative, co-founder of Latitude, the best conference I've ever been to in my life. You need to go to it in Miami in September this year. Saul has done amazing things in his life. He's had an amazing career, chairman, president, CEO of US West. He's been a president, CEO of companies, major companies in France and Australia. And he's doing some remarkable work here with his Latitude Conference and the Latino Donor Collaborative. We're fortunate to have him today, and I want to ask Saul about, what is it about the Hispanic economy, and what can we do here in New Mexico we're 48% Hispanic in New Mexico, and how can we learn from everything that you're doing to make New Mexico a better place for our kids that are growing up to stay here, to get educated, to get good jobs, to bring in more companies, and to do great things that we've seen other states have done?
Well, first of all, good morning. It's great to be here, and being in Albuquerque, it's almost like coming home. For me, as you know, Ernie, my roots go back through both my mother and father's side of the family, back into the early 1500s. So I think about this state as kind of home, as well as this country called the United States of America as my home as well, since the Spaniards were settling and colonizing here in New Mexico almost 100 years before the Mayflower landed over in the Boston, New England corridor. So this is home, and it's great to be here. Now, relative to the Latino conversation and New Mexico specifically, first of all, I have to say that one of the phenomenons we're seeing in our country today, 21st century America, is that the Latino cohort is the driver cohort of growth. Whether you talk about entrepreneurship, business formation, whether you talk about labor force, new entrants, whether you talk about consumption, meaning the purchase behavior initially in the consumer side of the economy, but also now the business side, given its size, it's getting dominant in terms of numbers like over 50%, over 60%, over 70%. And most of us remember in second grade math that means you're the mero meros, right? You're the meta metas, the mero meros, the lead, the most dominant force of growth in the United States. And that's where we're at. So now let's take it to New Mexico and Albuquerque specifically. New Mexico has the greatest population percentage of Latinos of any state in the country. And New Mexico has this rich history, obviously the longest history of almost any state in the country. And it has a triculture advantage of the Latino American, the Anglo American, and the Native American. And it's unique. So it has many unique attributes, including a beautiful state, including all the natural resources that it does have. And so my view has always been that New Mexico could be one of those prototype states, and Albuquerque is a prototype city that says, here's how we're taking advantage of this cohort that is more youthful, more entrepreneurial, more everything, and it's going to help propel our state, city, and country in a unique way. So there's a lot that needs to be done, though. And the one thing that I found on the national level when I came back from Australia and I was seeing things about let's build walls and let's deport people and let's do all this other stuff, I'm thinking of one word that comes to mind for me. Somebody has to be a pendejo or a pendeja to say that. And the reason why is because this cohort is the growth. It's the youth of our nation, etc. So I'm a believer in gathering data. I'm a business person. That's how I competed around the world. I've competed on every continent in the world outside of one, the coldest one, because there wasn't much there. but I've, in the Middle East, Africa, Europe, Eastern Europe, China, etc. I've competed there, and I love competing.
Yeah.
And the way that I found that I could always win, and we always did win, is by knowing the data about your customers, about where the growth is, about opportunities, where you can grow it, and technology, etc. And so in the state of New Mexico, there's a lot here that needs to be gathered because I haven't seen it yet. And I know that's what you're thinking, Ernie, and probably the governor and other people in the state saying, look, let's now package ourselves in a 21st century context, which means you have to have data. And it's measuring volume, it's measuring the number of companies being created and formed by Latinos and Latinas, the average age, the growth rates, all that sort of thing that become part of the packaging, which is what we've done at the national level. So at the national level, the U.S. Latino cohort is the equivalent in size. If it were a nation by itself, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. How many people knew that?
Not that many.
I would say 0 minus 1, because I suspected that, but we created a format to do a GDP at the national level around Latinos. We used economists that have done it at the national level, done it at the state level, so we didn't reinvent a wheel. We just used the pattern of the wheel to gather the data around Latinos. That's probably needed in New Mexico to talk about how do we think about our growth, the contributions, etc. The second thing is that where like within the chamber, what sectors are growing the fastest? Yesterday, I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of your members at a luncheon event, and I was talking to people that were talking about Web3 and blockchain and all these new wave 21st century technologies that are going to be defining businesses and their capabilities and their ability to serve customers, their ability to compete, etc. And it's here in New Mexico. It's happening. There's young people, and maybe some not so young, that are doing that. Well, the question then becomes, so how are they getting funded? How are they getting supported so that they can emerge as players not only in Albuquerque or New Mexico, but around the country, and perhaps for some around the globe? Because now in the digital era, 21st century America, it's a digital America. It's not the analog that you and I were birthed in, but it's now different. And I'm a digital guy. I led the charge, 30, 40 years ago about digitization of everything. And it's exciting. And so when we talk about the youth of Albuquerque or the youth of New Mexico, when you have an exciting story about your future, people want to stay. They want to be part of it. And the question is how is it getting supported? How is it getting catalyzed? Part of the answer is capital. Part of the answer is the technology platforms and partnerships within the educational institutions that exist here. And then part of it is just encouraging kids as they're going through their educational process, whether it be in grade school or middle school or whatever, that they're getting this digitization of lifestyle. Now they're getting it by gaming, playing games. They're getting it with their mobile devices and going online on social media platforms and et cetera. But they need even more than that. They need the math side of the utilization, because everything now is getting defined mathematically. So when you talk about artificial intelligence, it's a function of what are the inputs and what are the data sources and the data sets and all that. So it's a long answer, Ernie, but I think that New Mexico and the city of Albuquerque, being the biggest chunk of New Mexico, has a chance to redefine itself in a 21st century context and be one of those prototype states, because it's big enough yet small enough to really garner resources, to unite, to attract capital, and to create the infrastructure, tax infrastructure, regulatory infrastructure, and other things to really catalyze more growth.
Well, you talk about a movement, Saul. I mean, this is really interesting because, data that rules all, right? And so that's one of the things I think is most exciting about your conference is how you talk to other CEOs and other people in the entertainment industry about data and what's really happening around. And then speaking about data, so we have a convention and tourism department here at the Hispano Chamber, and I know that just because of what you're saying and what we've learned from the data that you produce, that tourism for Hispanics has to be growing. A lot of people must be wanting to travel to places like Albuquerque and New Mexico from out of state, out of the country, because of what you just said. Everybody wants to understand the culture 100 years before, the food, everything like that. Do you see that as also a prime mover of the economy, the Hispanic economy?
Tourism has been part of the history of New Mexico because it's a historical state. Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Taos, all the places that have been on historical sites. But it's more than that. And it's more than that because you can now create virtual tours using the digital platforms of attracting people into the state because they get to see the oldest home in America is in a Taos Pueblo location. The oldest non-Native American home that's still standing is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Now, how many people know that, right? And how many people know the migration pattern of the Spaniards when they landed at San Juan, went to St. Augustine, searching for gold, and they came inland. And where did they sort of locate in their first wave of inland territory? It was around that northern New Mexico part of the country. And it became, where they brought priests. They started building churches. They started colonizing. So there's a great historical side for tourism. And it's tricultural, the Native American, the Spaniard influence, the new Mexican, which is the integration of all cultures, right? And so everybody has something here. So it's great for coming, but there's a digital launch that can be associated with it, which goes back to the future of the state it's a great place to live. It's very multicultural in terms of its context. So it's already solved some problems that are problems in other states. When you look at Texas, right? There's a battle going on where some people don't like the browning of America, what they call the browning of America. And I use the P word again. You can be a pendejo or a pendeja. I mean, my view as a business person has always been the more people I let into my store or into my business, the more the revenue that I can generate, the more workers I can attract, the more shareholders that I can attract. And so it's a combination of growth. Well, Albuquerque being and New Mexico being multicultural, being entrepreneurial with some of the things that you're already doing, creating that profile of the businesses, people are going to want to come here not just to see all the great historical stuff and the beautiful landscapes that are part of New Mexico, but also the new landscape that's being formed around entrepreneurship, around business, around taking advantage of all the people in the state, not just some of the people.
Well, I think, Saul, that what you're saying just excites me and excites everybody that could be listening to you because, your heart's still in New Mexico. And, we're believers here at the Hispano Chamber. We're believers that we can do things in a better way, that you're one step away from creating your dream. And so we love what you're saying. We want to help what you're saying come to fruition. We think that New Mexico is kind of hidden in plain sight. And so I think if we do the right things that you're talking about, if we use data and we use the legislature, the governor, the policymakers, if we can get their attention, let's make this just a tremendous state that we all know we are. We call Albuquerque rich in the extraordinary because we do have so many extraordinary things. And a lot of people don't realize it until you sit back and think about the triculture part of Albuquerque and New Mexico. Saul, what in the perfect world would you think Albuquerque or New Mexico could look like in 20 years?
Well, I like to make things pragmatic in terms of answering questions like that. There's a city in Florida called Miami that 20 years ago people used to call sort of the international capital of Latin America. But most people didn't feel it was part of America. Well, the people there have worked hard at growing it as a financial center, as a center for entrepreneurship and all that. And now Miami has become one of the vibrant cities of America for every sector of the economy. I would say that Albuquerque, being more towards, the population concentration of a Colorado and Nevada and Arizona, California, Utah, it's kind of in the center of that as well. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of population, a lot of workforce, natural resources available here that for me in the ideal, it's the state and city getting into this notion of we're going to create a vision for the future and we're going to build to it. We know how to execute to it and actually have the building blocks created because they're not many. They're capital. They're the facilitation of business formation and the support of businesses through tax structures, regulatory structures, things like that. And then the training of workers. And I'll give you one last example. Miami-Dade College. It was run for 25, 30 years by a gentleman by the name of Eduardo Padron. He innovated there with a 2-year college that became a centerpiece for a lot of the tech companies that are now the most famous companies, and creating worker programs, training programs where they are getting educated in a broader sense. But at the same time, when they leave, they almost have jobs waiting for them. Oh. And that draws people to put businesses in that location, in that city, in that state. And that's what New Mexico can do as well. And I can show you Austin, Texas. I can show you Boulder, Colorado. I can show you other places around the country. So there are benchmarks. But people have to be focused. They have to be together. And it has to be a whole team effort, as you described.
Right. Well, Saul, I know it's time for us to say goodbye, but we're so fortunate that you came by, and we hope that we can bring you back here another time or two. We're going to keep in touch, and please, everybody, think about the Latitude Conference in Miami. When is it?
It's September 27th through 30th.
It truly is the best conference I've ever attended, and you can see from my white hair, I've been to a lot of conferences. So thank you all for attending. We'll see many of you at La Noche Encantada Zorro. So thank you very much.
All right.